you don't know how you're going to handle a situation like that. If somebody had told me at the age of 19, you're losing your kidneys, your legs, your hearing in your left ear, your life is going to change forever, I would have said there's no way I could handle that. But then it happened. And you find strength. You find that you're not only much more capable than you ever realized, but there's a lot to live for. That your happiness is not in these kind of physical things. I think your happiness is in the things that you do, and in the act of problem solving and figuring out a way. And I think that really became my mission, was constantly to figure out a way to snowboard again, figure out a way to walk gracefully, figure out a way to share my story, then to become a professional motivational speaker, or to help get snowboarding into the Paralympic Games, or anything else that I've gone on to do. It's always been this mission of, the path is not clear, so I have to figure it out, and I've been very grateful to be able to do that. My name is Amy Purdy. I'm a 3-time Paralympic medalist, motivational speaker, and you are watching Behind the Brand with Brian Elliott.
Hey everyone, I'm Brian Elliott. Welcome to another edition of Behind the Brand. I'm here with the incomparable Amy Purdy. Amy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I usually ask my guests, how did you get this job?
I made this job.
Well, let's take it back to the chronology. I want to go back to young Amy, and I asked this question a lot for context, what you want to be when you grow up, because I think there's basically two camps of people right now that I'm thinking of. Is you have young people that are in school and maybe finishing school and coming out thinking, what am I going to do with my life? And then you have another group of people who are maybe middle-aged, who because of this pandemic and crisis, maybe they're downsized, they lost their job, or it's a time to pivot, and they're thinking, what am I going to do? And so I think signals are interesting and important, and I'm just curious, what you were thinking about when you were a little girl, what you wanted to be when you grew up. Did you want to be, a professional athlete, or did you want to be a doctor, or scientist, or plumber, or own a flower shop, or what was on your mind?
Gosh. When I was young, I wanted to be an astronomer. I was fascinated with space. I was fascinated with the unknown. I couldn't understand how there wasn't an edge or an ending to the universe, how it just went on forever and ever. So I think I loved the mysteries of life. And yeah, I thought I was going to be an astronomer.
Wow, deep thinker right from the get. So did you have influence from your parents? Did your mom or dad, what did they do for work?
I didn't really have influence for that from my parents. And I'll tell you, I'm just, to be honest, this didn't last my entire, high school career. It's not like I was 18 thinking I was going to be an astronomer, but I definitely remember, I think probably till I was about 12 years old, I wanted to be an astronomer. And my parents, actually, they were entrepreneurs. They had different jobs. We actually ran at one point when I was 18 years old. We ran multiple businesses out of our home. So my mom worked as an insurance agent outside of the house, but she also worked for this network marketing brand, and my dad had multiple network marketing brands, but he was also a realtor. My sister was an interior designer. She's a year and a half older than me. I was a massage therapist, and I worked for myself kind of part-time. And so when the phone would ring, we never knew, who they were calling for, what business they were calling on. But I think I grew up seeing my parents work really hard. I grew up seeing my mom very passionate about her job, very disciplined, and do very well as far as, successful at times, for sure. We knew that our parents worked really hard, and I think my sister and I, we just grew up knowing that we had to work hard as well. I mean, we started working when we were probably 15.
Yeah, a family of hustlers. That's awesome. I love it. And representation matters too, right? So if you see your mom working hard, getting it done, I would guess being a female that's a very impactful, impressionable experience.
It was for sure. And, you know, seeing that she enjoyed her job, and we didn't have a lot of money though, but we had enough. And I think my sister and I we always knew we also had to work for what we had or for what we wanted. My parents gave us both a credit card when we were 15 that we had to pay off. So they were like, okay, here's your first step in how to manage your money. And so we did that. We both, you know, we had a credit card, we had to pay it off. My dad bought us a car, an old beat up junky car, but we had to pay the insurance, we had to pay the registration, we had to pay the gas. So, I mean, we pretty much knew, you know, from 15 on, if we wanted a car, we had to pay for it. And my sister and I worked multiple jobs in high school. And I think it just came really natural for us to always run our own business versus working for somebody else. My sister became an interior designer and still is, and is very successful and runs her own business. Mine has changed multiple times. I was a massage therapist, and I worked out of the house, and I also worked at this world-class spa at the time. But you know, but really, I've always worked for myself. I've really never worked for anybody else.
Yeah, that's awesome. Where did you grow up?
We grew up in Las Vegas. Born and raised, which you would not think that a professional snowboarder or any snow athlete would come from Vegas. But we had ski resorts outside of Vegas. People don't realize that about 45 minutes from our house, so my dad built this house out in the desert, and we complained at first because we thought, why are we so far away from everything? But it ended up being not far from a ski resort. So every day after school, I'd drive up there with my friends, and that's where I learned to snowboard.
That's awesome. When did you start getting signals that you wanted to be an athlete and really compete? Like, how old were you?
So I was not raised an athlete. My house is not athletic. We're definitely outdoorsy, but we didn't watch sports. I wasn't raised watching sports. Of course, I would watch the Olympics here and there. At that time, snowboarding wasn't in the Olympics, so I didn't really have that to look up to.
Give us some context about what year that was, just for...
Yeah, well, let's see. I mean, gosh, when I was in high school, I mean, I graduated in 1998, so I guess in about 1994 is when I first started snowboarding. And my family, they were big skiers, but not athletes. It was more just, that was our lifestyle. We had a condo in southern Utah. My aunts, my cousins, my parents, we would all go out there, you know, over Christmas maybe and do a 2-week ski trip, and we get that in every year. But I was never good at it. I was never good at skiing. But I had fun with it. I mean, it was just, I never took it seriously. Definitely never thought I was an athlete. Didn't play any sports in high school. But I fell in love with snowboarding at the age of 15. And I was introduced to it by some friends who were artists. And I was an artist as well. I situated all my classes where I could do multiple art classes back to back, which means I spent half my day just in the art studio at school. And I met some skateboarders and snowboarders and some musicians, and they all snowboarded. So they were artists who skateboarded, but they also snowboarded. And they invited me on a snowboarding trip, and I went, and I picked it up really quick. My motivation was I was the only girl, and I was hanging out with all these guys, and they didn't teach me anything. They just said, all right, you're going to strap in and you're going to follow us. And that's basically what I did. And I picked it up like that. The first day I was like, wow, you know, the motivation that that you get from having to keep up and also having a crush on the guys, that helped. So I picked it up and just fell in love with it and loved more so the lifestyle of it. You know, it wasn't to me a sport. I wasn't an athlete, but it was something that I really fell in love with the people, the lifestyle, the culture. I wanted from that point forward to snowboard for the rest of my life, one way or another. And I kind of set my job up so that I could do that. So I decided the day after high school to move to Salt Lake City, become a massage therapist, And my thought was I could travel the world with this job. I could live in all these ski resorts, and all I needed were my hands, and I can show up and I can basically pay my way as a snowboard bum, but have some money. And that's really, that's all I knew, is that I loved massage, I loved travel, I loved snowboarding, and that's what I wanted to do.
Okay, so then where did it take you? So you moved to Salt Lake City. You were trying to sort of snowboard and work, and then what happened?
Yeah, so I lived in Salt Lake. I was snowboarding. I was becoming a massage therapist. I actually got hired back in Las Vegas. One of my massage teachers was brought on to hire massage therapists for this world-class spa in Las Vegas. It was called Canyon Ranch. And I was hired. So I was one of the youngest massage therapists. I had the least experience out of everybody hired there. They had some of the best massage therapists in the world hired. I was very honored to be hired. And so I ended up moving back to Las Vegas, working at Canyon Ranch, and absolutely loved my job. I loved helping people. I loved knowing that I was, healing people, that people would come to me and feel better afterwards. And it was also, and I realize this now looking back, it was also very kind of meditative for me, because it's such a quiet, calming environment that, as I'm doing the work, I was also very calm and relaxed. And I actually feel like I was my most intuitive in those days, because I was quiet enough to, I think, listen to myself, right? Listen to my feelings and my thoughts. These days we have our iPhones and we get distracted, but I loved my job, and I felt like this is something I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And I felt like I was on top of the world, because I was actually making really good money, especially for my age. I was thinking, here are my friends out of high school are working at a clothing store, making minimum wage, and I've got this career of my own, and I'm making great money, and I love it, and I really felt on top of the world. And then suddenly, like that, my life changed forever. I contracted something called bacterial meningitis. We have no idea how I got it. All we know is 1 in 4 people are carriers of this bacteria, so it's fairly common, but it's not common to get sick from. It's very deadly if you get it. And I ended up in the hospital fighting for my life, and my life changed forever.
How old were you at the time when you found out that you were sick?
I was 19. I was 19 when it happened, and it was hard. I mean, I thought I knew what my life would look like. I thought I knew. At that point, you're 19, you kind of think you know everything about life, right? And then all of a sudden it just goes right out the window, and I had to completely reinvent myself, reimagine the possibilities, and not just start over, but completely, start fresh, relearn, and just recreate a new life for myself.
Without getting too personal or into too much detail, can you sort of describe the impact of a diagnosis like that? I mean, you said that your life changed, everything sort of went in a new direction, but what exactly did that mean for you as a 19-year-old, healthy, active snowboarder, massage therapist? What actually happened?
Well, I was actually at work one day and felt like I had the flu. In fact, I didn't even think it was that at first. I just thought I was really drained. My energy was drained. I thought, gosh, I'm really achy today. And I made it through about 3 massages, but then I decided to go home from work early thinking I had the flu. And that night I had a temperature of 101, which is typical flu-like symptoms. Next morning, my temperature actually broke. So my family went out of town because we had planned on going out of town anyways. And I was like, don't worry about me. I probably have a 24-hour flu or something. I'll just meet up with you guys later. But that afternoon, instead of feeling better, I started to feel worse. And I remember my mom calling at one point and seeing how I was. And I said, I feel like I'm dying. Like, I am so sick. But even to this day, anytime you have the flu, you feel like you're dying. I mean, there was really nothing in me. I didn't actually believe I was dying. But little did I know at that time I was actually going into septic shock. And I was so tired. And after I got off the phone with her, I closed my eyes, I fell asleep. And not long after, I tried to open my eyes and I couldn't. It's like it took every bit of energy in my body to force myself awake. And then I fell in the deepest sleep I've ever felt. And then suddenly I heard a voice say, "Amy, get up and look in the mirror." And this voice was so startling that I immediately opened my eyes. I didn't see anybody there. But as I was kind of sitting up, I started to realize something was really wrong. My heart was beating out of my chest. I was weak. I was shaky. I was so sick. It took about 5 minutes to get into a seated position. And then I put my feet on the floor and I stood up and I realized that I couldn't feel my feet. And when I looked to the floor, I saw that my feet were purple, and then I saw my hands were purple, and I looked at my reflection in the mirror, and my nose, my chin, and my cheeks were purple as well. And so it hit me in that moment that I was dying. And luckily, right then my cousin walked in my mom had called her to come check on me and just bring me some Gatorade. And she walked in and she said, "Oh my God, it looks like you're dead." And I said, I'm dying. I know I am. I have to get to the hospital." So we rushed to the hospital. By the time I got there, my lungs collapsed, my veins collapsed. I was immediately put on life support, given less than a 2% chance of living. It ended up not being the flu. It took 5 days to figure out that it was something called meningococcal meningitis, which, we had never heard of before, had no idea how I got it. I was so healthy. I mean, I was a vegetarian at the time. I worked out every day. I was a massage therapist. I was in the healthiest work environment you could be in. And yet this bacteria just blindsided me. And it's very deadly when you get it. And I was very lucky. I mean, it was a miracle to survive. I fought for my life for about 2.5 months in the hospital. Full organ failure. All my organs failed or hemorrhaged except for my heart and my brain. Multiple surgeries. And at the same time, that my feet were ice cold. I felt that entering the hospital, and then I was in a coma for a while. So before going into that coma, they put me into an induced coma. And before that, I asked my dad if I could see my feet, because I was like, my feet hurt so bad. And at this point, I'm also gasping for air. My lungs are collapsing, and he pulled back the sheets and I saw that my feet were just purple. And that's my last memory before going into a coma. And then kind of like a week and a half later, I started to wake up a little bit. I was on a respirator and life support and started to wake up a little bit. I also had a lot of moments in there where, the doctors, my family, they thought I was going within minutes, and I would just barely hang on by a thread. And they had to shock my heart a few times into rhythm. So that week and a half was, my parents were on the edges of their seat, not knowing if I was going to survive or die, like every second of the day. But about a week and a half later, I woke up, and I was kind of in and out of it for a little bit, and I knew my feet were in trouble. And I felt so grateful to be alive when I learned what all I had been through. And actually, the very first thing I said to my dad when he said, "Amy, do you have any idea what you've been through?" And I said, "Well, I know I've got the flu." That's when they took the tube out of my throat and I was able to talk. But he said, "Well, I know I've got the flu." And I said, "Did you guys call and tell my work I won't be there till Monday?" At this time, I think 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks had passed. And my dad was like, "Wait, do you have any idea what you've been through?" And when I realized what had happened and just how lucky I was to survive, my body my body fought for me when I wasn't even aware, right? When I wasn't even controlling it. And I thought that was amazing. And so, I knew my legs were in trouble. I went into septic shock, and that had happened early on, and I lost circulation to my feet. That's why they were so cold, and my hands, and that's why they were purple. I was very close to losing my nose, my chin, my cheeks. I mean, it was a big deal. But I will say that the level of gratitude that I had to be alive, when I was this close to dying, that's what initially got me through those tough days and made me grateful. Like, well, okay, I just got to kind of pick up the pieces and move on from here.
Yeah. I mean, wow. Amazing story. I just have no words. You know, what you must have gone through. So hard. And yet, you know, the result of that is gratitude. Like, you know, blown away.
I think you don't know how you're going to handle a situation like that. You know, if somebody had told me at the age of 19, you're losing your kidneys, your legs, your hearing in your left ear, your life is going to change forever, I would have said there's no way I could handle that, you know? But then it happened. And you find strength. You find that you're not only much more capable than you ever realized, but there's a lot to live for. You know, that your happiness is not in these kind of physical things. I think your happiness is in the things that you do, and in the act of problem solving and figuring out a way. And I think that really became my mission, was constantly to figure out a way to snowboard again, figure out a way to walk gracefully, figure out a way to share my story, then to become a professional motivational speaker, or to help get snowboarding into the Paralympic Games, or, you know, anything else that I've gone on to do. It's always been this mission of, you know, the path is not clear, so I have to figure it out. And I've been very grateful to be able to do that.
So I want to go back for a second to the voice. I'm very curious about that. Are you a spiritual person? I mean, what do you think that voice was? How do you explain it? How do you describe it?
So I'm not a religious person, but I do consider myself very spiritual. And I would say at the time I was as well. Being a massage therapist, you're much more in touch with your spirit, I think, than a lot of people, right? It's almost like being a yoga instructor or something. And you know, when I heard that voice, it was interesting because it was a mixture of my voice and a thought, but very, very stern. You know, it was just like, Amy, get up and look in the mirror. Enough to force myself awake when I couldn't really wake up before. And so I believe it's connected to the divine somehow, because had that have not happened, had I have not heard that voice, I wouldn't have gotten up and I wouldn't have looked in the mirror, and I probably would have just laid there, fallen asleep, and died. I was in septic shock at that time and didn't realize it. So my cousin would have walked in to check on me, probably saw that I was sleeping, and that's it. Unfortunately, with what I got, meningitis, that's actually the way that many people do die, because you don't really know it's anything worse than the flu until it's just suddenly too late. And so if it wasn't for that voice, I wouldn't have jumped to my feet. I wouldn't have realized my feet were numb. I wouldn't have made it to the hospital. And yeah, I mean, I'm, you know, it's moments like these that are miraculous and divine, and it just happened at the right time, that make me believe that there is something there. You know, there's something bigger than us. There's something guiding us. Sometimes we just have to be quiet enough to listen.
I'm getting goosebumps listening to your story, but also thinking back to little young Amy staring up into the cosmos, having a very quiet, personal moment, you know, looking up and thinking about astronomy and all the things, and I can't help but feel, you know, wow. I mean, the parallels that maybe you were looking up into that sky, and maybe a divine power, if you want to call it God or a higher power, whatever name you attribute, was you're making a connection there, and maybe watching down on you, if you want to look at it that way. I mean, it's amazing. That is an amazing story.
thank you. I mean, I I have that to always go back to. I had multiple other kind of divine intervention moments as well, but I always, when times get tough, I always go back to these moments that were miracles, and just surviving was a miracle. Even the doctors said that was completely out of their hands, that I pulled through in as good of condition as I did. I ended up I lost my spleen, I lost my kidney function, I lost the hearing in my left ear, and I lost both of my legs below the knees, and I felt lucky. And I think that's that feeling of gratitude, like, it could have been so much worse, is what carried me through and allowed me to kind of, bounce forward to an incredible life. It took a while, and it's always been a challenge, but I'm motivated by challenge. I realize that now. So.
Yeah. So here's the lesson that I hear that's sort of like punching me in the face, which is adversity is not one of these things like it's an option. Like, we should not be surprised when we get knocked down or we have a hard day or a hard month or a hard year, or something tragic happens. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. So then the question really is, one, are we ready for it? Two, when it comes, what are we going to do about it? Because I really do think that in many cases it's binary. It's either one or the other. In other words, adversity, and I've seen it happen, I've let it happen to me too. Adversity can crush you if you let it. And you can get knocked down and then you don't get up. I've been there. Or you can do what you did, go to hell and back several times, and bounce back and say, all right, that happened, that was terrible, tragic, awful, unfair, all the different names you can attribute to it, and then you decide, you know what, I'm going to get up and I'm going to move forward. And wow, I mean, I'm blown away, absolutely blown away.
You realize you're still okay, right? If you're still here, you're okay. You're lucky to still be here, actually, with all the different things that we go through in life. I mean, we're so lucky for every moment we have. And when you realize that, you actually can use that adversity to your advantage.
I mean, we were just sitting back, chopping it up, reminiscing about the good old days and all that. Tracking my roots, where I came from and where I'm going. But like I say, man, always said it, it's not about the destination, it's all about the journey. Ain't nothing changed but the weather. The dangling carrot that hang from the rear view. Your dreams in the past ain't nowhere near you. Backseat drivers got nothing but 2 cents. Shotgun riders too biased, they all liars. I should get an A for effort, I'm too tired, but I'm never giving up, that's why I'm kinda admired. Role model, like it or not, I gotta play.